Civilization 6's first 10 turns are crucial. In this video I'm going to teach you how to master them. I'm playing as the Hungarian Empire in a randomly generated world, but that doesn't matter. These tips that you can see on screen are universally applied. Let's begin. The most logical place to start, of course, is to consider our settler and our capital. Where are we going to place this bad boy? First and foremost, I always recommend that you move your warrior first. It makes sense, right? You need to scout out this land, and you need to find value. I'm also really focused here on tiles that are going to provide me the most yield. Ideally, we want some 2 food, 2 industry tiles, like this one here. Woodland, hills, all good yields, or of course those crucial strategic resources, or bonus resources. This looks like not a terrible start, and it's on a river, which will provide me with fresh water. If I was inclined to move this settler one way or another, which by the way, don't be afraid to spend a few turns moving your settler. You've got 500 in a game. You can spare a couple at the start for a better capital. It will pay off in time. It looks to me like I'm interested in moving this way, maybe towards a 3 production tile. However, that would be away from the river, and I don't know if there's going to be any more fresh water that way. So I think I'll use this exploration chance still to move as far as I can, 2 tiles, try and get as much vision as possible. Not only, of course, will this be helpful for settling this dude, but in future, let's not forget our wider goal will be to claim a lot of this land and then fill in the gaps in between with additional cities. Grow your empire wide and then fill in the gaps if you need to. Now, in terms of actually placing the settler, the game will always provide us some advisory tips, and generally they're pretty useful to read. However, the other thing that I'm also considering is moving to a different spot and how many turns it will take. I'm uncomfortable sending the settler alone into this unknown, likewise here. So I think that actually, this is not a bad starting location, starting right here. Let me quickly tell you why. As I'm going to get all of the tiles around the city centre, I'll be able to immediately work some pretty good tiles. Ideally, I'd like 4 yields. You can see here I have 2 food and 2 industry. Here I have 4 food. So I could go for a fast and slightly less productive build. The other thing to note is, of course, that certain luxuries could provide me with more. I don't know if the 1 science is quite worth it to me just yet. Either way, for the purpose of this demonstration, I think this is a pretty good spot to settle. So I'm going to found the city, immediately connecting the adjacent tiles, and if I hover over it, you can see that it's working the 2 food, 2 industry. Consider that your staple for building a solid foundation. Our next considerations are what technology do we want, what things do we want to learn, and also what civics do we want to embrace. Now, for the start on the civics, it's going to do Code of Laws by default, so we'll put that aside for a minute and instead look at our technologies. This can be overwhelming, especially if you don't know which districts you want to go for, you haven't quite decided your game plan. By the way, you should have that in the back of your mind already. Instead, we're going to look at the map. We're going to use the map as our inspiration. This is the easiest default to fall towards. Hover over your resources, tiles that you will be able to improve in future, and consider what technologies they need the most. Here, I note that I need mining and irrigation and animal husbandry to improve these tiles. Now, of course, each one will have its own requirements. Animal husbandry will be the easiest one to get online first, but it might not be the best for me to build. Either way, this gives me a really good direction and a solid base. Mining, animal husbandry, and irrigation. As I jump to the tech tree, of course, I note that science is important, so writing might be on my shortlist. Archers are fantastic. We'll talk more about build order and units in a minute, though. That's a really juicy part, so do stick around for that. Other things I really don't need, though, right now. For example, sailing. Not really a great priority for me. I'm instead going to move for animal husbandry, hold down shift-click mining second, and then we'll go pottery, and maybe through to irrigation, but at this point in the game, we might tackle our first technologies, and then when we get to this point, we can say, hey, do I actually need to build a plantation right now, or do I want my campus first? With 2 mountains here, and acknowledging that campuses benefit from being near mountains, it may be that this spot eventually becomes a campus. We won't talk completely about planning ahead and placing map tags and all that sort of thing, but it is important to note that if you have the better map tags mod, which I would really recommend, and it's one of my 5 mods that I recommend in my must-have mods for Civilization 6 video, link in the doodly-doo, you might want to do a little bit of planning in this very early stage, but for the first 10 turns, that's not our consideration. We've got our technology sorted, trying to fulfill Buddha, our capital, as much as we can, and I think we're ready to move through and consider build order next. It is always difficult to try and figure out what is exactly the right order. A lot of players will say go for a scout, a slinger, and a builder. Or they might say get your monument first, and then go for a scout. That's the wrong move. But there are lots of different ways that you could play it. And of course, you're going to want to think about who you are actually playing as well. If you are, for example, a civ that really benefits from scouting out and exploring as much of the land as possible compared to your neighbors, then you might want to do that. In this case, though, I tend to recommend one of two build orders. Build order number one is probably my favorite go-to. What you want to do is ensure that you have a reasonable number of units to defend, because early defense and offense is vital, so the slingers will be your friends there. And also you'll want to get your monument. Now the exact order is up to you. I quite like to go slinger, slinger, monument, or slinger, monument, slinger. But again, entirely up to you. My first thing that I'm going to build though, and this is the one tip that I'd like for you to take away if you take away anything from this section, is that if you compare the cost of a slinger to a scout, or even a warrior to a scout, in most cases, the scout, which let's remember doesn't have any sort of real incredible strategic benefit, okay? Yes, it is fast. It is a faster moving ancient era reconnaissance unit, and some of its promotions will enable it to move through the map quicker, but by and large, the slinger will be more useful, and for only one additional turn to build it, the amount of strength that I'm getting is outstanding. Hit the multi-queue and we can queue up the rest of this, so I don't have to worry about it for the remainder of my 10 turns, and I can get out there, explore the world, and figure out where I want to establish my next cities. In general, it may even be a good idea to delay the production of builders. So in this case, my general recommendation for you would be to go slinger, another slinger, and a monument. This place is a little low on industry though. This is not a god start. So there could be a case for adapting as you go. Again, it'll be a case-by-case thing, but if you go slinger, slinger, monument, settler, or another way I like to do it is to remove the second slinger. If I'm feeling like I'm under less threat, and there may not be as many barbarians or civs next to me, then I think you can get away with delaying the second military unit. Whether it's a slinger or not is up to you. So, I've ended my first turn. Fantastic. We're of course going to continue to use the warrior to try and scout out as much of the surrounding land as we move through these next few turns. Going to be really, really important. Don't forget also you could choose to change how you want your citizens distributed. If you go manage citizens, you could, for example, bounce this person over onto food. This would grow the city a lot faster, but it would reduce its industry, right? So you might want to keep your production up. Either way, at this point, we're dealing with fairly low yields. It's not the end of the world. Continue to explore with your warrior, but do keep them relatively close by. I quite like to do a circle, first of all, to try and scout out the surrounding area, because things like this can happen, right? You don't want to be completely undefended. And while getting out and scouting around and finding these fantastic tribal villages, these goody huts, shout out to Civ 5, generally speaking, you want to keep it close, keep it guarded while you explore until you have that second slinger online, or that first slinger online. And that is why it is so important, I think, to build a unit first, and why building a slinger or even a warrior over a scout tends to be better, because you'll be able to stop these emerging threats before they really, really stuff your entire game. Because as I said at the start of the video, the first 10 turns are absolutely the most important. If you can't make the most of these first turns, you might as well just re-roll. Speaking of re-roll, if you do get a bad start, this one is okay, but not the best ever. Or if you spawn next to a particularly aggressive or powerful opponent, you might want to just consider re-rolling. Around turns 4 to 8, you should have your first unit. Ideally a settler online, a slinger online. That will allow you to, again, do some more exploring, shore up your defenses, and here you can make the call. Do I want to build my second slinger, or do I want to go for my monument first? In this case, I'm actually going to swap it on its head, go for my less ideal second route, and grab the monument. Then, of course, the final thing to queue up before you get to turn 10 is a settler. Again, I'm going to make a judgment call on whether I want the slinger or the settler first. For the time being, I'll leave them queued like this. By the time turn 9 or 10 rolls around, you'll probably have ran into a neighbor like me. That'll be an opportunity for you to start building up some diplomatic relations, if you wish, or potentially, of course, find a target. The units come from this way, so it suggests to me that they're probably over here. I might, in that case, start to send my slinger this way to see what's going on. Nice little defendable mountain range, potentially, to shield me from them. As we cross over into turn 10, depending on how powerful your start was, likely a little bit better than this one, you may start to have things online, but at the very least, you'll need to think about your civics as well. Now, two things to note. Firstly, just like the tech tree, don't forget this is the cultural tree, you do have your boosted improvements, your eureka moments to strive towards, so keep them in the back of your mind. My recommended go-to strat for the civics tree in the early game, of course, we're trying to move towards ultimately political philosophy. This will unlock new government types for us and allow us to have loads more cultural policies at play. In the very early game though, your first decision once you finish Code of Laws is going to be craftsmanship or foreign trade. I won't delve too deep into all of the intricacies, but in general, because we're not jumping straight out of the gate and building builders, because we need to explore the world, we need to defend ourselves, and we need to shore up our aggressive tactics potentially first, it tends to make foreign trade better. Combine that with the fact that we are likely to discover a second continent, the Eureka bonus, which will double the space pace at which we can research this. I tend to recommend foreign trade first. Early Empire is a good grab straight afterwards because you'll unlock colonization, plus 50% research discount, industry discount cost on producing your settlers. This is massive. Generally, foreign trade into early empire is a great way to go. I will give a quick shout out though to state workforce. It's another requirement bridging us towards political philosophy down the line here, and it unlocks the government plaza, a super powerful district. And by moving this slinger along, again, using my slinger as a scout, slightly less optimal of course than the vision and movement points that a scout can gain, but much stronger and more versatile moving forward. Don't forget, inside of the tech tree, there are bonuses related to the slingers. If you want to get fast archers, by far and away the best units that you should be focusing on building early. They are great for defense generally. If you've got 2 of them, you'll be okay. And of course, you can also use them on offense. Makes the slingers even more useful. There are no unlocks related to scouts here. Another reason to prioritize the slinger. And that's it. I've crossed through into turn 11, now into turn 12, and I hope you've got a feeling for how this plays out. Last time I made a Civ 6 video, you really liked the summary at the end, so I'm going to deliver a summary of everything we've learned right now. Firstly, early settle is so important. You want to try and grab tiles that have around 4 yields, and production will be king to your early game. Do of course take note of the strategic or bonus resources around. You need to focus on this red text in particular to figure out what to research. That leads us nicely into the tech tree, where of course we'll be trying to lean towards our strength. Don't research horses or camps or pastures if you've got nothing to past. Don't research mining if you've got nothing to smash your pickaxe at. It's straightforward, but it's important to remember, while also, of course, keeping these eurekas in the back of our minds. Their tech bonuses are incredible. Moving through to the civics tree, it's a similar story over here. I recommend foreign trade into early empire for extra production towards settlers and a wonderful base to get you towards political philosophy. Early build order largely focuses generally on using slingers as scouts, like I'm doing just here, and would you look at that? It found a scout. I couldn't have planned it better myself, if only it happened in the first 10 turns. And lastly, of course, we want to be keeping out for threats, circling the city, circling our capital, trying to find nearby neighbours, city-states to trade with. They'll have quests for us potentially as well that we might want to complete, and potential allies or, indeed, quick cities to capture. Thank you very much for watching this, my guide to the first 10 and most important turns in Civilization 6. If you enjoyed, I'd be happy to expand this out. We'll go to 25 turns, 50, 100 even. Let me know in the comments below. My name's been Jumbo Pixel, and I'll see you in the next one.